Right, that's us done. See you later. Right, what we're going to do is we'll have a quick Q&A, but what I thought might be a nice idea, we've got a really cool little dude who comes and does our Q&As. We found him this year at Brands Hatch. He's only 12, and he's going to conduct this, interview me and Sam, and then take some questions from you later. So actually, let's give him the biggest round of applause we can. He's age 12, his name's Lewis Maundrell.
Hey! How are you all today? Yeah? Enjoying the sun? Yeah? Okay, well we're going to be asking the drivers some questions, so let's invite the drivers up. Please welcome onto the stage, it's the speed from Leeds, it's number 8, Tordoff!
Speed from Leeds. Hello.
And please welcome onto the stage, he's won 85 BTCC races, 191 podiums and 45 poles, it's number 45! No, it's not,
You will get a bit carried away then, won't you?
a bit.
He's pretty cool, isn't he? Steve Ryder is not a happy man, because you're going to have his job at some point, aren't you?
Right, so Jason, you did well, qualified third, and you were second for some time, and Colin Tillman's the only person who seemed to improve towards the end of the session, just picked you unfortunately. You had a good battle there with Shen, and you dropped off to 8th, and then you came away with a comfortable third.
Yeah, well, we'll go back to qualifying. Qualifying was very good from the side of Sam, actually. Sam, I'll tell you his story in a minute, but you know, I think third was about the best I could have done. I didn't quite get my car doing exactly what I wanted to, but not far off. But I don't think I could have beaten Sam to pole. You know, the lap he did was a great lap. So, you know, starting third. Also, there's another rule. We're not mentioning Colin Turkle or BMW ever again today, okay? Is that a deal? Good. So, some bloke in another car from Ireland managed to pit me to P2 on the grid. But race 1 kind of went the way we thought it was going to go. We didn't think we could beat Colin off the line. And for me to finish, you know, reasonably close to Sam with the success quite fast I had on, I was pretty pleased with that. And ultimately, this stage in the year, you know, my main opponent is Gordon Shedden, so you know we've got to try and finish ahead of him, which we did.
Sam, you did the best you could in qualifying. Qualified P1, half a second quicker than anybody else. No surprise, unfortunately, from the man from Ireland. Unfortunately, picked you from the start. And then, unfortunately, there was a bit of a safety car, which bunched everyone up. And then you came away with a comfortable second.
Yeah, it was a good race. It's been a good weekend so far. Obviously, we know we've had some pace over the last couple of weekends, and we've just had terrible things go wrong with the car. You know, I broke down a race 1 at Knock Hill. Microphone. So yeah, we broke down Sinesta was third, and we led for so long and Knock Hill and broke down. So we've had the pace, we've just not had anything to show for it. And we did a great job yesterday. You know, I found a balance in my car that I was really happy with, and there's not many times you have a second quicker than everybody else in qualifying, so that was a special one. The race, as JP said, went as we expected. I got a reasonable start. Colin was just up the road. I hustled him the first couple of laps and then after the safety car, but once he gets into his rhythm, he's gone. I'm gone as well. Yeah, so it was you know, a comfortable second in the end. The car's good and we are the best of the rest, which is important. You know, we've taken a lot of points off the Hondas, and that's the aim of the game.
Now, Jason,
He mentioned his name, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's a fine. What do we reckon? Fiver? Oh, come on, that was up to you guys. Are you just a bit all got heat stroke? You're all a bit quiet. I mean, we like a bit of heckling and shouting and whooping and all that sort of stuff. Fiver? I'll leave it up, Colin. There we go, it's flat.
Now, race 2, you made a good start. You went up to second, then you made a big gap up to Sam, and then towards the end, Sam started to roll in a bit.
Yeah, in my blind enthusiasm and ambition to try and, I thought I could take the race to Colin, which was, in hindsight, foolish, because over the first 4 or 5 laps I really used, I really hurt my front tyres, and it wasn't until I could feel the understeer start to come, at about 4 laps from home.
Towards the end, but with the championship the way it is, Jason has to score the points, and it was important that Andrew Jordan came on strong at the end. It was important to keep him behind in 4th. What's interesting is, Jordan was on the soft tyre, which typically is a disadvantage because the tyre is quicker, but then the tyre wear comes sooner, and over a race distance it's usually worse. But we've seen in race 2, with Jordan, he finished 4th on the soft tyre, so there is some pace in that tyre today, and maybe it might be the tyre to have. Menu finished strongly on it in race 1 as well. So we're going to put it on in race 3, and normally we would be a bit worried, but I think we might be okay today. I think we'll be okay.
Now, race 3, you mentioned that you're running the soft tyres. Did you get much data from Mark Hines in race 1?
We did actually, struggled, which is good, useful information for us, because we know, whilst he's not in the KX Fuel Save team, we can still see his data. So we know exactly what setup he had, and then we can adjust ours accordingly. So it's quite beneficial actually to me and Jason to have a guinea pig, if you like, who's going to do it in a race before us, so we can learn off him.
Okay, now it's your turn to ask.
Don't repeat that guinea pig thing to Mark. He won't like that.
Now it's your turn to ask the questions, so I hope you've been thinking and you've got questions, so if you'd like to put your hand up and you can ask your questions. Yes?
I think everyone wants to know, when are you next going to bump a Honda?
Jason, apparently everyone wants to know when you're next going to bump a Honda off.
Race 3.
A little bit before the end of the year, don't you worry about that.
Will it be before the end of the day?
No, as I said, Colin is a really nice bloke. Fiver. Gordon is a really nice bloke, and I might let him through in this race. I'll find it difficult to let him through without any contact, though, I'm sure. Silverstone could be the place where that might happen.
What about the other one? What about the other one? You going to batten that?
Oh no, he's a fighter. He fights people, and I'm a lover. So, they're not compatible.
Right, any other questions? Yes?
Is there a reason you put you in the garage next to Matt Neal?
Is it?
Ooh,
Is there a reason
sorry.
why they put you in the garage next door to Matt?
Well, the question was, what is the reason why I'm in the garage next door to Matt Neal? And there is a good reason for that. It's done in championship order from the team's perspective. It also means we can heckle and swear at each other through a wire fence, which is quite fun.
Any other questions? Yeah?
This one's for Sam.
Okay.
Throughout the year, I've seen lots of length facial carpet. Now,
Do you
is
like
there a
it?
correlation between the facial buzz and your success?
Facial fuzz. It's not really a beard. I can't call it a beard because I'm not able to grow one of them yet. Would you believe it? Since I started growing facial fuzz, I've had a terrible run of form. The car keeps breaking down. So I've decided, because I became fond of the facial fuzz, it was just unlucky hair. So what I did was I shaved after Knockhill and have regrown more lucky hair this weekend. And it seems to have worked. So so I'm going to keep this on now. By the time I get to, for Anzac next year, I might actually have it.
Any other questions? Okay. Oh, yes.
Right, earlier on we could see you speaking to Gordon outside the garage. Would you happen to tell us what that conversation was about?
I will do actually, because it was a good wind-up. I spotted Dick Bennett, who's the team owner for the Bird from Ireland, behind Colin, looking over in my direction. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to wind up Dick by having a word with Colin, I've done it again, with Shedden. Yeah, you can do one. With Shedden, knowing that Dick Bennett was watching what I was going to say, bearing in mind we're going into race 1, bearing in mind that, you know, things can sometimes happen. So as Dick, and actually we weren't talking about anything really, we were just shooting the breeze, but as Dick Bennett was looking over, I kind of made a gesticulation to Gordon and went, so one of them. And Dick saw it and ran off into the garage. And so that's the only reason why I did it. It was a great opportunity to wind up a fellow team owner.
Any other questions? Yes.
Jason, I think it was Thruxton. Steve Ryder's put the microphone in the car and was asking you questions about front wheel drive and rear wheel drive. And you said at the end, you said, I want one. Do you still want one?
So the question is, do I want a rear-wheel drive car?
Yeah.
Well, under these current regulations, absolutely yes. You know, we don't want to harp on about it, but we did really, because it's not right. And the reason why it's unfair is because we have to run the equipment which we have to run.
Yes. And
TOCA decides what that equipment is. And when this formula was designed, rear-wheel drive was banned. It wasn't allowed in. And then they've been given some concessions to come in, and then over the winter they've been given more concessions, but we're not allowed to change our car. And the big difference is to do with weight distribution, it's to do with, and how that affects tire degradation, it's to do with traction. And if you look back in the history of touring cars, when there's been four-wheel drive, front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive all sharing the same piece of tarmac, then there's a penalty applied to a rear-wheel drive car in the form of weight. And back in the kind of the early 2000s, that was 100 kilograms of weight applied as a penalty. And just to give you a bit of an idea, right, it's not a moan from us. The regulations are not right at the minute. We want to get them changed. The centre of mass of the gearbox and the engine on all the front-wheel drive cars is forward of the front axle, which gives us somewhere like a late 60%, maybe even 70% weight distribution over the front. On the BMW, their engine is 1.3 metres further back. It's under the windscreen. It's game over.
Yeah.
And front-wheel drive car, we use the front tyres to brake, turn and accelerate. And a rear-wheel drive car, they only use the front tyres to brake and turn. So they spread the usage. And also, because it's a rear-wheel drive car, they can have bigger rear brakes, therefore use the front ones less. It's just a better package. And unfortunately, the organisers didn't see what was coming and they didn't impose the restrictions, because this formula is about trying to make it all even for you guys. You know, we want all the cars to be about the same sort of speed and all at the same performance, and then we have cracking racing. Well, I don't think you can call what happened in race 1 or 2 cracking racing, can you? Because one guy goes off in the distance. That's what we're whinging about, that's what we're moaning about, and that's what we want the organisers to change. Because as things are now, we throw all our front-wheel drive cars in the skip and we all go and buy rear-wheel drive cars. But there isn't, that means Vauxhall can't come in. It means, Ford can't come in. It means all the manufacturers who have front-wheel drive cars can't come and compete. So the regs have to change, but we want them changed now for obvious reasons. But it's difficult for the organisers, because if they change them, then they're basically saying, oh, well, we got it wrong. So I understand why it's tricky, but when you're in a front-wheel drive, well, I suppose the other way to think about it is put Colin, I'll mention his name again, in a front-wheel drive car, he'd be whinging. Yeah. It's just the way it is. And unfortunately, we have a responsibility to our sponsors and investors to try and create the best opportunities for them to win some races, and if that means we have to be a bit vocal and say things, then so be it.
Okay, a few more questions now. Can we have one for Sam? Is it for Sam?
Oh, yes,
Okay, we'll have the Jason one.
I just wanted to know how do you feel about Alan when you coming back in and you'll smile when you stand up to
Yeah, well, you know, Alan Menu, I learned a lot from him. He was my first teammate when I joined Williams Renault in '97, and at that moment in time, probably for '97, '8 and 9, he was the best touring car driver in the world. So I was very fortunate to learn, you know, not just by having access to his data, and so not just the driving element, but learn how all the really important stuff, which is what goes on outside the car, you know, the politics and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, he was a great, even though he didn't want to be a mentor of mine, he was actually. I learned a great deal from him. So yeah, it's nice to see him back, and he's a good bloke actually. Alan. He wasn't when I was racing for him. He's the right shit. But it's funny how things change over the years. But yeah, he is a great touring car driver. You know, he's not in the best state of fit at the moment, but yeah, it's good to have him back. And he looks old, which is great because that makes us look young.
Any questions for Sam? Yeah.
One for Sam. You got any lucky mascots, or don't think it makes any difference?
No, I'm not really too superstitious, to be honest. I don't have any lucky underpants like a lot of drivers do. The only thing I do before a race is usually take myself off to a corner and just sit quietly and have a think. There's two schools of thought. There's the rock ape that punches himself in the head and gets himself fired up, and that's not me, to be honest. I much prefer to be chilled out, concentrate on what I'm doing. Sometimes look at some data and some map when I'm sat in the car and just refresh what I'm going to do for the race. So no lucky suspicions for me personally. I just like to keep it all chilled out. And I think it's important because, you know, there's a hell of a lot of pressure on our shoulders. You know, sponsor expectation, team expectation. We've got like 25 guys over there that are all, you know, worked crazy hours so that me and him can go racing. And you know, they put all that effort in, and then it's ultimately they hand the car over to you, and it's down to you and nobody else. So, you know, you've got to deal with that pressure best you can. And for me, the best thing to do is just to sit calm and quiet and think about, you know, get everything else out of your head and concentrate on the racing.
Okay, final question. Yes, you in the back. What's the maximum speed of Sam Tordoff's car?
You've got any idea? I think we're probably doing about 140, would you say, into turn 2?
They get up a bit. Yeah, 180. Massive speed. I would think we're probably doing over that actually. Probably somewhere between 140 and 150 by the time we touch the brakes down into turn 2. I would think somewhere around there. But I don't know what the average is. What's the average speed down here? About 90? Yeah, so average is about 90 over the lap. So yeah, maybe it's one. If there's any girls listening, it's obviously 190, isn't it? Yeah, 190 mile an hour. That's the sort of velocity we live at.
So basically, in simpler terms, it's quicker than the Hondas. Okay, thank you very much for coming. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for coming to the filling station. Please join me in putting your hands together for number 88, Sam Tordoff, and number 99, Jason Plato.
I think it might be nice to give you a round of applause because you're mint. Give a round of applause for you. We'd love to stop and do some autographs and stuff, but there's some good girls over there which require our attention, so we can't, obviously. So, yeah, thanks a lot. We'll see you soon. Bye.